Welcome to tonight's show of Mysteries, Crimes, and Conspiracies. I'm your host, Adam, along with Mari.
Hey.
Tonight we'll be talking about the Titanic, which is an interesting topic.
Yeah, definitely interesting.
I know Mari has been a fan of the Titanic, the conspiracies, the mysteries, and what actually happened to it for as long as I've known her, a long time. And
Yes,
definitely.
definitely.
This is something we just figured we'd talk about a little information about it, talk about what went down, what people think went down, some weird conspiracies, who knows, all kinds of stuff. And this is show number 1, and we'll see how we do. So what do you know about it, Maury?
Well, it was a luxury passenger liner, and it sank on between the 14th and the 15th of 1912. It was on its maiden voyage, which was crazy.
So you're telling me this thing went down on its first trip?
Mm-hmm. That's what makes it more sad, I
But
think.
but it was supposed to be a huge ship, right? For back then.
Yeah,
I mean,
it
even
was.
by today, it's still a good size.
Yeah.
But it was well built from the looks of it. I mean, by that point in time, even though 1912 was a long time ago, over 100 years, they'd already been building ships for a little while.
Yeah.
So the techniques were, good. It's far better than like the Christopher Columbus stuff of way back when.
It was pretty luxurious for its time, anyway. So it was pretty cool. It was traveling from New York City to Southampton, England. So it was traveling quite a ways.
Southampton. I thought it was going from England to. It left New York.
It left New York. Yeah.
Oh, I always thought it left Europe. It was going over here to New York.
Yeah. So.
But it left New York and was going to Europe.
I think so.
Okay.
And there were 1,500 people aboard.
1,500. What was the total capacity of the boat?
I think at 3,000.
So they were about halfway.
Yeah.
And I guess that's because they tested. I mean, didn't they do some like test voyages? But they had to test it out, right?
I'm assuming they did. But yeah, only 2,200 people were aboard. I think 900 of those were crew members.
900. Wow, so half the people were just people running the ship.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, I guess you probably needed a lot more people to do things on those ships back then.
Yeah.
They didn't have the technology of today.
Well, like I know they used coal and stuff to heat the,
Oh, like a steam engine?
Yeah.
Kind of deal?
So they had a lot of people working deep
down.
Oh,
that's what those big smokestacks were. Okay.
So there were constantly people in there that were pushing coal.
Yeah, that's powering the engine.
Furnaces.
Like old school locomotive. Man, that would suck.
Yeah.
You imagine doing that?
Yeah, because they had to stay down there. Like there was no,
So I guess they'd have to know how much fuel they could burn, coal or whatever it was they were burning. How much time it would. They'd have to have so much of it on the ship, so depending on how far they were going.
That's why I'm assuming they had to do some kind of test run to know how much coal they had to have on.
I'm sure they did, but still, they'd have to have extra because what if something delayed them, a storm or whatever,
Yeah, exactly.
I still think that job would suck.
Yeah, I mean, I agree.
Yeah, well, I guess it was a job back then.
But yeah, I mean, people had to get paid and stuff. So,
right.
And I'm sure it was still kind of interesting for them to have that job and then.
Oh well, yeah, you're still traveling across the world. I'm sure they just worked a shift and then they got to either go relax or you would think, you would hope they get to go relax.
Right.
Who knows?
I know on the ship there was the captain. Edward Smith, and they said he was, pretty popular, he was really...
Yeah, he was pretty good from what I hear.
He was known, really well.
Yeah, he was experienced.
Yeah. So they also thought that was really good, and they were more trusting,
Right.
Because he was so prominent, I guess, during that time.
Right.
So that was pretty interesting. I know there were some other people that were on there, too, that were traveling, that weren't just a part of the crew, more prominent people, but, wealthy people, too.
Well, I mean, I imagine... Back in 1912, just to get on the boat, you'd probably have to have some good money on you.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they were pretty pricey. Even for third-class passengers, I'm sure it was, quite a bit.
Yeah, their third class was still, rich compared to, your everyday person back then, Because this was a luxury voyage, right? So, there was other ocean liner. Okay, let's, real quick, Titanic was an ocean liner, right? And basically, those are the ships that they used to get across the ocean. This is before the days of giant airplanes, so that's legit how they got across.
Right.
When you wanted to go to Europe or to America or wherever. And it's not like a cruise ship. These are ocean liners are more sturdy, stronger built from what I understand. But it's because they were built to be used long distance,
Right.
opposed to just short distances.
Right.
But this was a luxury one, which kind of makes you think if it was a predecessor to the modern cruise ship in a way.
Yeah, it's kind of like the cruise ship stuff today, but just back then they had similar stuff.
It's like the OG.
Somewhat similar stuff to what we do, like what we had.
Well, I saw the pictures with the
like
the grand showcase and the staircase or whatever and all that, and it's all like that fancy
depending on
mahogany or whatever it was.
Depending on what class you were and like what floor I guess you were on or whatever, like they had different amenities.
But I mean, there wasn't like any poor people really. I mean, maybe some of the crew, unfortunately, but like I said, you had to have money just to get on it.
But even with like third class, like they had to have money to get on there in the first place. But I mean, they had a lot of they really didn't have a lot of stuff that the higher class people had.
Really? So it was just a privilege to get on it at that point. It was a privilege
to really be on it, but at the same time, so first class had more luxurious rooms. They had where it's kind of each passenger or family would have their own, they had their own suite, but they had rooms in those suites.
Right.
It was
like a little
mini
apartment
kind of. But from what I was reading into, the third class, they were more like bunk beds.
Hey, but that when you for 1912, that's not bad.
I mean, that's true.
I understand the massive difference, but I would imagine just to get, like I said, third class is probably a really wealthy person.
Yeah.
It just shows you how much more wealthy the higher ups were.
Right.
The mass wealth that these people have, even by today, they'd probably still be rich, which is ridiculous.
And their own little sinks, next to their beds, and I think they had certain bathrooms that they would share, I think, and certain areas that they could go eat and things like that. So they were
even the first class. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I imagine that was probably a technical issue,
but they kept them pretty well, the separate classes. They had them pretty well separated. They kind of kept to their.
But
own.
What about on the public areas? Were they not allowed to mingle?
They might have been.
I don't know why that'd be weird.
I didn't really hear too much about them really.
Well, I know some of the ocean liners in the 50s had separate. There'd be 3 decks, one for the lower, the middle, and the higher class.
Yeah, I think that's what it was.
And so they weren't even allowed to go to the other pool because they didn't pay that much. And
I really think that's the way it was.
Kind of weird to me,
There, each class kept to their own. They had their own areas that they could.
They were too good to talk to the plebs below, huh?
Yeah, pretty much.
Huh.
Yeah.
Weird.
And of course, third class is stuck on the bottom.
Yeah. Well, right? I mean, I know even on cruise ships, there's actually some areas where if you didn't pay to be in it, you're not supposed to be in it.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you can go anywhere on a ship, and it's not, that's public. You know what I mean?
Even though I feel even now when there's different packages you can get, I feel it's not really based on class or
right.
It's just wealthiness is just what you choose.
It's just the package.
What you get and what you don't get. Whereas back then, I feel you were labeled as either first or second or third class.
Right.
And
so if you didn't get on the boat, you were a scrub.
Well, I mean, yeah, pretty much. Pretty much.
Yeah.
But still, it was interesting, and they,
So these guys, maiden voyage. They're loading up. They're taking off.
Mm-hmm.
And how many days did they cruise? I mean, did they even make it? Did they make it past the first night?
Yeah, I think they were on their fourth night, I think.
And how long was it going to take? About a week, probably?
I think about a week. So they were maybe halfway, I think.
That's pretty impressive if you think about it. 20 years ago or something now? 108? I don't know. A long time ago. But the fact that they could even get across the ocean in a week and it was relatively safe.
Yeah.
I mean, compared to the wooden boats of years earlier.
Mm-hmm.
That was pretty impressive feat.
They were going pretty good on their voyage. I think at one point during the trip, it was recommended that they increase speed. So they were actually trying to increase speed.
Now, why was that?
I think they just wanted to get there. They wanted to stretch her legs basically and see what she could do for one. But two, I think they wanted to kind of.
Now that sounds like something they should have did during testing.
That's true.
But
for some reason they did, and so
Huh.
And even during that time that they were on the
imagine
voyage,
there was probably a tight schedule when they were building it, and they probably had a rush.
Well, it took 3 years for the Titanic to be built.
But I bet you it really probably should have took 4. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there was some rushing.
And they rushed it. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there was some rushing.
Because those rich people pay for those tickets, and they're told a date, and they expect that date. And if you don't get it, then they got to get refunds. And
well, there was another ocean liner that, not ocean liner, but another company besides White Star.
Is that the one that made the Titanic?
White Star's who made the Titanic, yeah.
Okay.
And so they made 3 actually: the Olympic, the Titanic, and the Britannic.
So it had two sister ships.
Uh-huh.
They were clones of each other, or pretty close?
They were pretty close. The Britannic, I'm not too sure, but I know the Olympic and the
Well,
Titanic were
I've
pretty
seen
close.
pictures of the Olympic, and it was pretty dang close. I don't think it was as luxurious inside.
Right.
But from the outside, the structure, and it had the three stacks, right? Was it 3 or 4?
I thought it was 4.
Man, I don't know, man. But I have to look at a picture here in a minute. But yeah, I think it was pretty similar from what I've seen. I don't think the inside was as luxurious. But they were pretty much clones. So even though the Titanic sank in 1912, its sister ships survived.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of them actually sunk later on.
Yeah, I think so.
I think it was the Britannic.
I think it was the Britannic, yeah.
I could be wrong. The Olympic, I think, lived on until who knows when. And then, from what I understand, did they just scrapped it or something? Can you imagine?
Possibly.
That's so crazy. You know, that must, I guess, to them was just a shipwreck. But had the sister ship survived, that'd be like a piece of modern history now.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Definitely.
It's crazy how they would just scrap things over years. But you know, I guess people weren't as pack ratty as we are now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So White Star Line is who had the Titanic built. They had them at Harland and Wolff Shipyard in Belfast, Ireland.
Ireland, huh? So what did it do? So hit it. Okay, so if it was built in Ireland, did it cruise across to New York to go pick up the passengers?
No, then it must have been. It must have been.
Yeah, I think they started in Europe.
Started in,
See, I knew we were wrong on
in
that.
Southampton, and we're traveling to New York.
Now, guys,
obviously
we're
we
not
never made it.
professionals here. We're just flying by. We're just, we're just fans of it.
So they started the production on it in 1909. So it took 3 years for her to be built.
Do you know how much money it cost?
I'm not sure of how much money it cost, but I mean, imagine it would be.
Well, it'd be a ton of
bit.
money, even in today's. I know it's like, man, hundreds of millions of dollars to build those ships now.
So they say with around 3,000 workers is what it took
to build it.
To build her.
In 3 years.
In 3 years, and some of those workers actually died while they were building it.
Well, maybe I see it, and that makes you wonder: was there a ghost on that ship?
I mean, it's possible.
I imagine ghost ship.
Especially if they died while building it. I mean.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because all that stuff was dangerous back then. Like, they didn't have
modern it's still dangerous
now.
Yeah. Definitely more dangerous back then. And it seemed like they just didn't care. The loss of life was just, they just accepted it. It was you're going to lose some people while you're building it. Just like when they built what's that dam here? That big dam, Hoover Dam?
Yeah, the Hoover Dam.
Like, there's dudes that died, and they just, from what I understood, they would tell them, hey, there's a chance you could die when you're working there. But anyway, I imagine that's like that. Similar situation.
Yeah, I'm sure they were told the same thing, when they started working on it and stuff, and I'm sure they knew the risks when they started.
So, was there any precautions built that was the icebergs even a worry to them, or not really?
I mean, it was always a worry because when you travel, I mean, there's always gonna, especially during the time of year that you're gonna be traveling, it's possible. I mean, I know during her voyage.
And I guess they were traveling, if you think about it, from New York to England. That's kind of higher up. So. You would think there could be ice, especially if it's wintertime.
Well, from what I've read, they had, during that time that she was on her voyage, she actually got many warnings from other ships that there was possible ice in the area.
Mm-hmm.
So I know one of them, I don't think actually got to the Titanic. They had sent it, but I guess never received it. But there were other warnings that were sent to her, and I don't know if they didn't listen or what. So
it was warned. They probably just, from their point of view, it wasn't looking too bad.
Maybe not. I don't know. Just based off of if they did receive those warnings. I mean, you think they would have slowed down?
Maybe they did.
Or maybe they did. I don't know.
Was the ship? You always hear about these ships built with the front of the ship is reinforced, they call it an icebreaker or something. Was it equipped with that?
I don't know if it was equipped with that or not, but I know she was built to where only four compartments were to flood. She'd still be
they had those. So for those who don't know, cruise ships or ocean liners, they're built with these, I guess, safety features in mind that are something were to happen when you're out in the ocean. They have these giant compartments on the bottom of the boat, and it's basically like an empty air chamber or something. And I guess I don't know how to describe it. It basically, if something happens, and let's say the ship gets pierced on the side, or I guess even from the front.
Even from the front, yeah.
Those things will take on water, right? Mm-hmm. And they can hold so much of it.
Yeah.
And they're designed to do that to keep to stop the ship from sinking. but they only have so many of them, and only so many of them can actually take on water. The other ones, I think they call it. I think it helps keep it afloat. Actually, it's I don't know.
That's what. Yeah, I think that's what it's supposed to.
Well, I know sometimes they actually use their fuel tanks, and because as they're traveling, one of their fuel tanks will empty out, and they'll just have a big empty tank.
Right.
And from what I heard, to even keep the balance on the ships, they would actually fill it up with seawater to keep the ballast or whatever. You know what I mean?
Well, the way that
so they could take so much on to keep their balance, and it would still not sink. But basically, if they lost more than what they were designed to, so like let's say you said it was designed to take on four punctures. Four compartments
to take on water with 4 compartments. If it didn't go past the 4th compartment, they would be okay.
If it did, they would probably sink.
And in this case, it went into the 5th compartment.
Right.
So that's why she started sinking.
But even though let's say it just did 2 compartments, but the way it got hit, it was damn near like it was ripped in half. So I don't think that was going to stop it.
I'm under the impression that from documentaries that I've watched, that if she had been hit head on, she could have still survived.
Yeah, because of the whole design of the icebreaker, right?
Right. But she got hit from the side, and it scraped so badly.
So she's cruising. They're on their 3rd or 4th day. You said.
About
people are enjoying it, luxury lifestyle, living it up. It's probably a little chilly out because they are in the wintertime.
Right. It was cold.
And it's a foggy night, from what I understand, and
actually, they said from what I read, it was actually a pretty clear night. Like people talked about being able to see the stars. And
so it was a clear night.
So they said it was.
So how the hell they didn't see the iceberg?
So that's why it's kind of unusual. But they were saying maybe it's some kind of I'm not sure exactly how they described it or what they called it, but supposedly it causes some people to on the boats and stuff to have hallucinations, they like a mirage kind of.
Right.
Where they think they see something there, but then they don't.
Right. And so they had a spotter, right?
Yeah. So I wonder if they just saw.
So that's
something.
The guy you're talking about.
Yeah. So I wonder if they were.
There's some conspiracies about it, and we'll get into that part a little bit later. But let's just go with what the supposed story is for now. So they're cruising, and basically by the time they spotted it, it was too late.
Too late. Yeah.
So they spotted it.
They tried to turn.
They started trying to. They had not a mayday, but an emergency.
Right.
Turn, and these are the ships that had those old school big old steering wheel things, right? So they see it going, iceberg or whatever, and the captain's like, oh shit, and emergency turn, but they were able to turn. But in reality, I'm starting to think they should have just went into it head on.
Yeah, something. I think they should have just kept it the way they did, but they tried turning, and then
so they turned, and it didn't scrape on top; it scraped below the waterline, right?
Below the waterline,
you got to remember the iceberg. What you see above the water, it's usually 2 or 3 times bigger underneath the water. It's a big old piece of ice. It's just a little piece of it sticking out. So even though they, on the outside, were making a turn, half the bottom of your boat obviously goes underneath the ocean. It's under the water. And the side of it, as it was turning, ran into that big old chunk of ice. And that ice, when ice is solid, it's like a rock,
Yeah.
And even though the Titanic's made out of steel or some sort of metal on the sides, that metal's not as thick as it would be at the icebreaker point.
Right.
So it just got ripped up like a jagged knife. And I've seen the images of it where it got gouged. And so at that point, they knew they were hit. Everybody on the ship knew they were hit.
You could feel it.
Yeah, of course. It ripped open, and didn't it kill some people instantly that were working down on the bottom?
Oh, yeah, because so when it started flooding, of course, the bottom compartments are going to get flooded first.
Yes.
So all the workers, they, some of them drowned, some of them,
got trapped.
Got trapped or got crushed because those doors, once they started coming down, you couldn't stop them. They were.
So they had emergency doors that kind of shut off areas too, right? And people got trapped in there.
So people got trapped in there. They're trying to escape the water. And
so they basically fucking drowned.
They drowned.
And that was ice cold water.
Ice cold water. Yeah, it was freezing water. So.
That sucks.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
So it's flooding. It's taking on water. I guess they were trying to do a mayday call too to other ships, right?
They tried sending out calls like, hey, we've just been hit by an iceberg. We're going down. We need help. But there was another ship, but he was a couple hours away, right? Yeah, there was another ship, and that was at least 2 hours away. Right. And then I don't know if there was any other ships in the area. There might have been one other ship. I don't remember, but I don't know. Was this another ocean liner, or was this like a Navy vessel of some sort? I think it was another ocean liner.
Yeah, I don't think there was any military
No.
nearby. Because it was pretty out there at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So real quick, once they knew that it was imminent, like they were going to sink, they started telling passengers like you need to get your life jackets on, you need to start
right
doing what you need to do.
Yeah.
They decided right away that it would be better if women and children got onto the boats first.
Okay. Sounds pretty noble, especially that's something that seems pretty common, especially for back then.
Right. So they started doing that, but
what about third class passengers? Were they still allowed, or were they forced to wait?
From what I read, they weren't really. I wouldn't necessarily say they were forced to wait, but I feel like since they were more at the bottom, they were kind of like last to come up. Like it was.
Oh, so the lifeboats were up top. They were higher up.
Lifeboats were way at the very top, and they were.
So
way at
even
the
though,
bottom.
what about the first class men? Were they allowed to board before the third class women? Or did the men still have to? To me, you think the men would have to wait?
It was still women and children. It didn't matter what.
Right.
Whoever managed to get up and get on there. I know in the Titanic movie, they made it seem, and I don't think this is actually true, but they made it seem like everything was locked down on the third class passengers. Like they only could stay on their area.
Yeah, it was like
that wouldn't allow you to
I
come
remember
up.
that. There was like some gates. I think that was bull.
That were locked, but in real life, it wasn't like that.
Yeah, I think that's some bullshit.
I mean, they still kept to themselves, I think, and stayed in their area.
Right.
But none of the doors were locked.
I'll be honest with you, on this off topic, I don't care for that movie. I don't care for it at all. I like the documentaries, I like reading about it. The movie is just so dramatic. It, like, takes... I know they had to build a storyline, but it's just too off topic from the actual ship for me.
I mean, I personally love it. I think it's a really good movie, but I also know that...
But you get my vibe, it's a love story, right?
Yeah.
I want to know about the boat. I guess I'm not really...
That's why I actually like the second half of the movie.
Where it's more about the boat.
Because it's more about when the ship actually gets hit. And
well, it's a really long movie too, right?
It's 3 hours.
So I get bored. I mean, I know.
Like when
I have the attention span of a pea, y'all.
When I watch it, I probably just most of the time go to the second part.
So you cut all the riffraff out.
That's the most important part to me.
All right.
Although I know that there are some inaccuracies, because I know in real life
I'd say quite a few.
They weren't locked down like that. But I know some of them made it up, and some of them probably felt like there was no point in going up. They were just like,
I don't know about that, but yeah.
But so yeah, there was on board, from what I can gather, there was 324 first class passengers, 284 second class passengers, and 709 third class passengers.
Oh, so there was quite a bit of them.
So there's quite a bit.
Third class.
Right.
And how many people could they hold on the lifeboats? They didn't have enough, right?
They had 20 lifeboats.
Okay.
And I think 4 of them were collapsible, which I'm not sure what that means, but they were collapsible, and the collapsible ones could only hold about 1,100, 1,187.
Wait a minute. You mean altogether? Collapsible.
No, I think it was for each one. I think they could hold they were. I don't know what they mean by collapsible.
Okay, well, if we go by what we've seen on the movie, those boats were very small. It's not like the modern lifeboats you see on the cruise ships.
I think in real life they were a little bit bigger.
Right.
They were.
But they couldn't hold 1,000 people. Everybody would have been saved.
They may be all together then on all 4.
Yeah, it was. So they only had 4 lifeboats.
The collapsible ones. They had other ones there, but they didn't have their full 20. I think they had half of what.
But then again, they didn't even have a full. But, you said that they didn't have a full ship either, though.
They didn't have a full ship for 1, 2. I think that's why they didn't have their full capacity of lifeboats, because they didn't have enough passengers. And
but they still didn't have enough for what they had.
Right.
That was a terrible mistake.
But from what I gather, also they didn't fill the lifeboats to the fullest that they could fill it.
Why is that?
I don't know.
Were they rushing to get off the boat?
I don't know why. I don't know if they were just rushing to get the boats off the main boat, or what, or maybe they felt like it was gonna mess up if.
Now at this point the ship is starting to lift, right, and it's basically cracking in the middle, or not in the middle. It was like 3/4 way, wasn't it?
3/4. I think it wasn't.
So at this point, it's starting to kind of not lisp, but back, kind of lift, kind of sink, where the front end is coming up. It's sinking backward, I guess you'd say.
Yeah.
So I guess you would lose some lifeboats that way because they're probably getting destroyed or.
Well, some of them were falling and breaking, and some of them they couldn't get the ropes wouldn't break. so they couldn't get it down right. And other ones did. Yeah, they.
So, as this is all going on, is it true that they played music the whole way through?
Yes, they did.
So the band went down with the ship. They didn't even get off. They died playing that shit.
They died playing it, and I don't think they found all of their bodies, but they did find a couple of their bodies.
So, ship's going down.
Uh-huh.
And they're getting as many people as they can. The captain died on the ship because the captain's supposed to be.
He went down with
the
ship.
captain is supposed to be the last guy. This even to today, the rules are the captain stays until everybody's off the boat.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, you're going to die with the ship if
Yep.
you don't get everybody off.
Yep.
And it's really enforced when the 2012 the Costa Concordia went down in Europe. That they considered him, the captain got off before everybody was off, and they considered him a coward.
Yep.
And I mean, he went to prison.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he went to prison for that shit.
Yeah, he did.
And the generals on the thing were telling him to get his ass back on the boat, and he was making up some bullshit.
Yeah, I heard that. They're like, you need to get back on the ship.
As you can see, back in the day, they had a lot more honor. That old man at the Titanic, the captain knew he was going to die.
Yeah,
because he knew they didn't have enough boats. He knew he was fucked, but he accepted his fate because he didn't want to. He knew that if he got back, they were going to call him a coward, and his career was going to be done anyway. You know, and that was
true of another person who was on the boat. I believe it was I think it was Mr. What was his name? Ismay, I think. If I'm thinking about the correct one.
Mm-hmm.
There was one gentleman that ended up making it off the boat, and he was criticized because he had made it off. Like he's like,
wasn't that an Asian guy or something?
I don't know if he was Asian or not.
Yeah, I know there was an Asian guy that got off, and of course they were throwing racial shit at him, but
yeah,
he was highly criticized too. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean there was 22.
Go ahead.
There was 2,200 people on the boat, and 1,500 of those people ended up dying.
So they lost lost almost everybody.
I think only 700 made it onto boats out of the 2,200.
Did the people that make it onto the boats, did they all make it, or did they die too before the other ship showed up?
I'm not sure about that. I think there might have been.
I imagine some of them had frostbite and it was cold as shit.
Yeah, I'm sure some of them.
And I know some. Okay, so the ship's going down.
Right.
At one point they basically got everybody they could off on the things. Their other passengers are still on the boat as it's going down. They're falling off the ship into the ice cold water, and they're getting hypothermia, I imagine, pretty quick.
The water was like 30-something degrees, if not colder. Like, it was cold.
Yeah, well, it had been cold up for ice, right?
So they said, like, within 15-20 minutes, like, they...
Now, I mean, this is kind of off top. Probably this is a dumb thing to say, but, like, sharks and shit. Not only you're in the water, now you got animals. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it was too cold for them. I never heard anything about it. I'm just throwing it out there. That probably wasn't, but they froze. The people fell in, they froze, and they didn't.
Yep.
They died in the water quick because they didn't. So these people were still in these lifeboats, kind of backing off away from the ship. They really didn't have nowhere to go. They're just basically waiting. They had to stay in the area, really, because they were waiting for the other ship to come that they got mayday calls to.
Yep.
And so they're literally watching these other people die in the water and freeze to death and sink or whatever.
Yeah.
And so the ship's coming up, and eventually it's at too bad of an angle, and the front half just snaps off. Mm-hmm. You know, imagine that in the middle of the night. And this is out in the ocean. You got moonlight and you got stars, so you can see probably pretty decent at that point because of the stars and the moon. When there's no city lights, it puts off pretty good light. Mm-hmm. And they said that the lights on the ship finally went out when it snapped, right?
Yep.
And basically it snapped, the front half fell down. The whole back of the half just started to go under, and it was making terrible metal sound, all kinds of crazy, horrible sound and shit. And it was going down, and the people literally just sat there and watched everybody on it go down with it, and until it was eventually gone.
It took over about 2 hours for the ship to sink.
Yeah, and that was, but once it cracked, it sank pretty fast, right?
It did, I think, yes.
Once it broke in half.
For years, people were always wondering if it really did break in half. Like, some people didn't believe that the ship broke in half, and some people were saying, "No, I saw it broke in half, and I saw it sink."
Yeah, I remember there's varying opinions.
Were like, no,
but a lot you got to keep in mind, like, well, I can imagine. Right after that, yeah, you'd have a lot of opinions, but you'd think that would be pretty accurate. Now, as time went on, I could see the opinions changing because the people that were probably still alive were little kids. You know, and they don't know what the fuck was going on. Probably, I mean, I don't know. Excuse my language, but who knows?
Right.
So, real quick before we go too far into that, So they're waiting in the water at this point. And how long did it take for the other ship to show up? A couple hours?
I think so. Yeah, it took a while.
And obviously they were able to pull the people up.
Uh-huh.
And I guess they were telling them. I mean, that must have been fucking crazy, man. You know?
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I mean, they, once you got saved. But I know for like weeks they were searching the waters and they picked up bodies here and there.
Yeah,
and even then, like a lot of them never got recovered.
But they couldn't find. Well, like I said, there had to be some sea creatures that were feasting.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, I don't know. And then I imagine to this day there's probably some. Well, the bones probably deteriorated by now. It's been 100 years. But I imagine you'd find some fillings, I guess gold or silver fillings from teeth, maybe.
Maybe.
I know there's still jewelry and shit down there.
Yeah, they've seen jewelry down there.
So real quick before we go into that, so basically it was just a sunken ship at that point.
Mm-hmm.
For what? Let me do the math here. 68 years or so, I think, before because it was in the 80s when they finally found it.
Like 1985, I believe.
Because they couldn't even find where it was at.
Mm-mm.
They didn't even know the exact spot where it had sank.
No.
Because this is 1912, so there was no like GPS, and they just had their maps, and so they had an idea where it was at.
Yeah.
And that makes the top. I guess that boat was able to find the people because of the flame, the torches, or whatever the hell they had.
Yeah. Lights,
I don't know, but so years and years, decades go by. They can never find where it's at. People. Technology starts getting better in the 60s and the 70s. They're getting closer. And finally in the 80s, I think it's that documentary we watched.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They had that little submarine that was able to go underwater, right? Because this is really deep at this point, so you need a special sub so you don't get the pressure. They finally found it. What year was that? 84?
It was 85, I think.
85. And what's that documentary called? Do you remember?
Was it Drain the Titanic, I think? That's one of the ones I saw.
No, what's that real popular one? Well, either which way, you guys, you just search it, you'll find it. So they finally found it, and I remember they were like freaking out when they finally saw it on camera because it had not been seen since 1912.
Yeah.
Now keep in mind, this is the middle of the 80s, and it's already been under the ocean for almost 70 years at this point, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So it's still relatively the shape of it was. You can see everything. Of course, it's got all these sea urchins and moss and I guess rust or whatever the hell. And that's at the point where they realized it did break in half, right?
Yep. When they actually got to go down there and they saw it and they realized, hey, like...
So now they saw just how bad it was.
Yeah, they saw how bad it was and how
after
far
like
apart
70
they were.
years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because I know one part landed like over here and the other landed like a few miles like this way.
Yeah, so the front half that broke off was actually nowhere near the rest of the ship.
Nope. Mm-mm.
Now, I imagine that front half would be quite a bit lighter, so it would probably fall down. But the other heavier half, which had the engines and majority of the boat, I guess it fell down at an angle. And they were, how far apart were they?
They were a few miles apart. Like it was a good distance.
That's impressive that they ended up a few miles apart. But I mean, how far deep down is it? It's pretty deep.
It was pretty deep. Pretty deep down there.
Deep enough where they couldn't go scuba. They had to use a ship or because of the pressure.
Yeah.
But there was actually. When they found there was fish and stuff down there.
Yeah, there was like fish and like crabs and, other little...
So they're exploring with this machine. And I remember watching the footage and you could still see like China sets that didn't...
Oh yeah, there was still like...
You could see they found like the pieces of that staircase, right? Of course
Grand
it's all
staircase, yeah.
Jacked up and I don't know what you call it.
I mean, some of them you can still see some of some of the people's rooms, like stuff that they left in their room.
Yeah, there was like they even found like wallets or purses and stuff still in the bottom of the ocean that somehow survived.
Yeah, like coins and stuff. And
yeah, they found silver and gold. There was a bunch of jewelry, right? Because back then everybody had real silver and real gold. It wasn't all this fake crap like now. So the jewelry boxes and stuff, everything was like lined in silver or gold. So there was actually like legit treasure. Down there, and I remember seeing there's just little things like people's combs or their little hand mirrors, and I remember seeing like sinks and stuff, but the dish sets, I remember the dish sets still looked fine. They were porcelain, so I guess they survived under the water for as long as, I mean, no one's touching. What are the fish gonna do? Go up and lick on them? Yeah. No one's using them, and once it's settled, of course there was a bunch of broken plates and shit and all that. Yeah. But you could see the metal at that point was starting to kind of you can see it starting to deteriorate. It's been there for 70 years.
It's crazy. I mean, they even like there was even dolls, like little porcelain dolls,
Mm-hmm.
and other dolls of like little kids and stuff that went down there, and it was just
And, the thing was, when I was watching, I figured that we were gonna find a body or something. But like I
they
said,
only found like shoes. Like they would find shoes.
yeah, I saw
clothes,
that they found boots and stuff, anything like leather.
Not like where a body was, but the body's gone now.
Yeah, because and of course I was, like I said, I was a kid when I first saw it, so I'm like, oh, there's gonna be bodies and bones, but no, those are all
long gone.
Yeah, they dissolved or they got eaten. The bones and stuff were all dissolved, and most of the clothes probably deteriorated, and only certain
things.
Really high quality boots and stuff were still on the ground. It's like, dude, there was probably a foot in there at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And then
exactly,
you just see like remnants. Of course, now, what has it been? Almost 40 years after they found it. From what I understand, it's super deteriorated now. Even more so than it was in the 80s, because it's been 40 more years.
So there's like a certain type of bacteria that's on it, and it's slowly eating it away.
Yeah, that weird looking little, it looks like almost like the stuff you see on trees.
Uh-huh.
But it's all over the metal.
Yeah.
I've seen it. It looks creepy.
I think they were saying that in like another 20 or 30 years it would be gone or something.
So are they able to pull any of it up? Is it worth pulling up? Would it fall apart?
I think
too dangerous, not worth it?
I think they've tried pulling it up, or they've here and there, but I think it's so fragile.
Yeah, it would just crumble.
That it would just crumble, and so
have they been able to get any artifacts from down there off the ground?
From the actual, I think they have.
From the shipwreck. Seems like they picked up some mirrors and jewelry boxes and stuff, didn't they? With that, because didn't that little submachine have like a little robot arm that would grab stuff for them?
They've definitely picked up actual like trinkets, like they found there, like stuff that the passengers had.
Yeah, mirrors and shit.
Mirrors, china, like perfumes, brushes. I think there was even some safes or something.
Did they ever get that boot?
I don't know if they.
I'm sure they picked up a shoe somewhere.
Probably. There was even some money or something that was down there or something.
Yeah, because like I said, the coinage of 1912, the coins were all made out of gold and silver. So, that's not going to go. Gold and silver pretty much last forever.
Yeah.
Now, the silver under the water, it will start to tarnish and it'll turn a dark color. But nonetheless, you can still tell it's a coin. But the gold will never tarnish. So that should have been super easy to see. And I remember in the video, we did see some gold something reflecting.
Yeah.
But wherever there was gold, the other ones had them in silver.
But I don't know if they actually got pieces of the actual ship brought up. I don't know if they ever did that or not. I know other stuff they've gone.
Yeah, I don't think they were able to, because they just had that tiny little thing. I know they've gone down a few times since, but that's how I heard it. The last time they went down, they were like, it's really deteriorated. Like it's like even far worse than it was in the 80s.
Right.
But like I said, hell, it's been almost 40 years since they found it.
It's just crazy. Like when I look at images and stuff, and like when they go down there, and it's just like, dang, dude, that was actually like a ship that was up on top at one point.
And I'll tell you something else. So it's called the Titanic, and you're thinking, oh, this is going to be a massive ship. And for 1912, it was huge.
It was huge, yeah.
It was absolutely astonishingly huge.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, if you didn't see it around anything else, you go, that's a pretty damn big boat.
Ship, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was 1,000 feet long, was it? It was like 800 and something feet long or something like that.
I think it was, yeah. It wasn't, yeah.
And but it was a good size. It's even today, you'd be like, that's pretty big. But
yeah.
I didn't realize this until about 10 years ago, because you hear the Titanic and you're like, oh wow, the Titanic, right?
Mm-hmm.
But compared to modern cruise ships, it's a midget.
Yeah,
it's a runt.
Yeah. I've seen it compared to other.
I've seen it compared to the Royal Caribbean Symphony of the Seas, which currently is like the biggest cruise ship out there, and it absolutely dwarfs it. It dwarfs it.
Yep.
The Symphony of the Seas is massive. A massive machine.
Yep. Literally
twice, maybe even 2.5 times the height. A good 200 feet longer.
Yeah.
Far wider. Just a monster.
Yeah.
Compared to the Titanic. But that just goes to show you the technology that's changed over 100 and something years. That the Titanic is not so Titanic anymore. But nonetheless, still not definitely big. It's bigger than like your average like shrimp boat or whatever the hell.
Yeah.
So it's not a little bitty thing. It's still big. Just, by today's standards, it would be a smaller ship. One of the smaller ones, like in Royal Caribbean's line or whatever.
Yeah.
Now, real quick, they're actually making a clone of the Titanic, right?
Yeah.
And it's a replica, an exact replica, supposedly, as close as they could get it to how the 1912 one was. And people are going to be able to take cruises on this, correct?
Yes.
So it's a replica of the old ship, but with modern technology. Obviously, they're hiding the technology in it.
But it's supposed to be, yeah, like have a replica of like the same equipment, the same kind of
It'll be far safer.
furniture. Yeah, it'll just be a lot safer, obviously. But
yeah,
it's supposed to be pretty similar to what the Titanic was. With the
so
same
basically,
amenities
vision-wise, it's gonna look identical. But I imagine the bridge where the captain is at is going to be high tech. They're not going to be turning this thing with a freaking wagon
Right.
wheel. They'll probably have one for looks, but you know what I mean.
Right.
So when is that supposed to be? They're building it right now, right?
They're building it right now, so I mean.
And this is 2021 in January.
I think it's 2022. I think.
Supposedly it's going to launch next year. Now they're already selling tickets for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's expensive as hell.
Yeah, they're really expensive.
So me and you ain't going on it.
Nope, definitely not.
Yeah.
But it'll still be nice to see pictures of it and videos and, whenever it...
So before we wrap this up, let's talk about some alternate reasons, some conspiracies, if you will, supposedly why people say the real reason why it was sank or whatever. Why did it really go down? The official story is it hit an iceberg.
Right.
And if you look at the side of the ship from when they found it, there's obviously it was a giant gash or something hit it.
Right.
And so that's the official story. And that's the one I'm going to go with. Makes sense. But one conspiracy I heard, I don't know if you heard it. There was some kind of dude on a boat that was like a real power player back then. And he was opposed to the top oil guys of the day or something. And, even to this day, the oil tycoons, it's big business.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember who it was, Rockefeller or who, that was the oil guy back then. I can't remember for sure. But the rumor or the conspiracy theory behind it is that he knew this guy was going to be on that boat. So this guy posed some sort of threat to these oil guys.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, because see, back then, more so than now, you needed oil for machines, you needed oil for power, you needed oil for light. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people use lamps with oil power, you put the oil in it. So oil was a big business, more so than it is now, still big business now. But anyway, and I can't remember for sure, but it seems like this guy was really big on like the electric, or he found some other alternative source of power.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was like a Nikola Tesla situation, but it was opposed to, basically it was going to make his oil either obsolete or not needed as much.
Mm-hmm. Because
I think this was I think it was electrical power or something. Some form of electricity. I'm guessing here. I can't remember. But the conspiracy theory is that, when you're that big up of money, these people make things happen that it ain't right, but I think this stuff really exists. These people have these, power because they're so fucking... I mean, this is... If the first class people on that boat were rich, this Rockefeller guy was like Zeus level rich compared to them. They were peons to him. So that other guy that was competition was on there checking out he wanted to go on the cruise. So he's a bigwig himself. And the rumor is somehow the Rockefeller or whoever it was made sure that ship was going to crash.
Right.
So it makes you wonder if the guy who quote unquote never saw the iceberg purposely let it lead to the iceberg.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's interesting.
And then he knew he was going to get his ass on a lifeboat and get the hell out of there and go collect his payday once his job was done, and he also ensured that one guy wasn't going to get on the boat. And how do we know the dude that they were trying to stop wasn't murdered on the boat right before they crashed it, and that was going to be their excuse?
Right.
Who knows? And nonetheless, that's one theory that why this happened. But did he purposely hit it because they were trying to stop this? I mean, because there's millions and millions of dollars even from back then. And unfortunately, when in the world of evil, money talks. It's all about the money.
That's
true. Lives mean nothing to these people, to these reptilian style people. And so it makes you wonder too, did they have maybe like stick a dynamite or something on it? They set it off down at the bottom and act like they hit me, but there never was an iceberg. That's why some people said they didn't see an iceberg.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe this dude was in on it. He set off the dynamite. You know what I mean? Knew
Yeah.
he was getting on the thing either which way. And he had to have enough knowledge to know that they were going to be able to mayday a ship, because I don't think he'd commit suicide for some oil guy. If his promise was money, he wouldn't get it. He wouldn't live to see it. So that's one of the more popular conspiracies that I've heard. Have you heard any others?
I've heard that one too. The one I've also heard one that supposedly, even though there was an actual ship that did sink, but was it really the Titanic? Some people were saying that it's not the Titanic at all, and it's actually its sister ship, the Olympic.
Now, the Olympic and the Britannic were also doing cruises, right?
I think so.
But the Titanic was like the star of the show because it was more luxurious, correct?
Mm-hmm.
But the other ones were still nice.
The Olympic, yeah, it was designed as a luxury passenger ship also.
The Olympic?
Yeah, the Olympic. And the Titanic was kind of like had smaller variations of what the Olympic had, but they were still had pretty much the same things.
So the Olympic was even bigger.
So I think the Olympic,
smidge?
I think it was a tiny bit bigger.
Yeah.
Or maybe had just more amenities in it than
the
Titanic did.
But even more luxurious?
But I don't know if it was more luxurious. It just says it was a luxury ship, so I'm assuming it had the same,
So what's the theory of why they think it was? So they think it was the Olympic or the Britannic?
They think it was the Olympic.
Now, why is that? Wouldn't people know when they're loading up on the ship, hey, or did the last second they just repaint? Because, they basically paint the names on these ships back then.
So
do you think they swapped them around?
They might have. I know, so they were saying that the Olympic had certain traits on it, like a certain amount of, they were talking about the rivets, like there was either a certain amount of rivets on it or a certain patterns in which the rivets were put in.
Right.
And they were noting that, that it was, if you notice on the pictures of Titanic, they had the exact same pattern of rivets that on the
But
Titanic,
they were slightly different.
Olympic, right.
So were all three of these ships being built at the same time?
Around the same time, but I think it was the Olympic first, and then there was the Titanic, and then the Britannic was last.
It makes you wonder if the Olympic had a design flaw in it with those rivets.
That's also what they were saying too, because I think at one point the Olympic, I'm not too sure about this, but I think the Olympic might have crashed or had like a semi-crash at some point.
Seems like I remember them hitting something in the dock or a little tugboat or something,
and had,
right?
Like damage to like the bottom front part
of
it.
Right.
And they were also saying if you look at some pictures of Titanic before she sailed, she already had something messed up on the side of her, which already made her weaker in that spot where she got hit by the iceberg.
Therefore, it wasn't the Titanic; it was the Olympic. Now, did they have insurance on stuff like this back then?
So,
because I could see them making some sort of insurance, like modern day. I could see an insurance scam going.
Well, one of the theories also from that is that it was basically kind of like had to do with insurance. But I mean, I don't know for sure if that was what it is or not. But I know they definitely said that.
They definitely had some investors. I'll say that.
They definitely said that there were some people swear that they can tell different characteristics of the Olympic. That if you look at the Titanic pictures of Titanic before she sailed, she looks like she had the same characteristics as what the Olympic had. Mm-hmm. So they're thinking the ships were switched right before she took off.
And like I said, it also could be if it really was the first one that was finished, designed first. Every itineration, you would theoretically think that it's slightly better, slightly better, slightly better.
Right.
So maybe by the time they did so much on the Olympic, they realized, fuck, this is a kind of a design flaw, kind of weak.
Yeah.
So next month when we're working on the Titanic, we're going to alter the way we did this and make it stronger.
Right.
And they could have known, well, hell, we got a weak point here.
Mm-hmm.
But people had already been promised the Titanic.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Not the Olympic.
So,
because even back then, the word Titanic sounds like, oh, wow. Like, Olympic sounds cool, too. But Titanic sounds like something more like uppity people would want to go check out,
Right. Well, according to this, it says it was like, so White Star Line, right, was in stiff competition with the other company that I was telling you about. I don't know how to pronounce it.
And see, that's where I get it with a design flaw, because they were rushing.
Right, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, they rushed it.
I mean, see that? Who was the comp?
So, like Cunard or Curard?
Cunard.
Yeah.
Cunard.
So they were in competition with them, which is why they kind of started pushing to get these ships built. And so that's why they came up with the Olympic, the Britannic, and the Titanic. Mm-hmm. Because the other company already had the Lusitania, the Mauritania out.
So they wanted a trio too.
So they wanted, yeah. So, I think that's why they kind of rushed.
Right.
So maybe she wasn't equipped or built the way that she should have been.
Yeah, so they needed to get rid of. Well, maybe they. I don't know. They just figured if maybe the Titanic wasn't actually done in time.
That's what I'm thinking. Maybe,
or it wasn't. There was something on it that needed some serious repair. So they real quick threw in the Olympic and slapped the name on it because they,
right.
It's hard to disapprove them. I mean, prove who was who. They just had a name on it. I think they were all the same colors. They looked like pretty damn close.
Well, they're saying because I guess that the Olympic was already older, that she was already having some problems, and that it was going to be kind of like an economic downfall for them.
Yeah, there was a design flaw, and by the time they realized it, they were able to fix it with the newer ships.
So that's what the whole conspiracy thing on that is, that they switched them that way they could, she could crash. You know what I'm saying? Like they could just send her off, and they still have the actual Titanic, which was still.
Well, it makes you
really
wonder too if they probably thought they were going to be able to scrap the metal maybe.
That could be, yeah.
And they were, imagine the metal was still worth something.
So. They're talking about, like, if there was a lawsuit or something, I guess, for if something happened with the Olympic and, it was already messed up or whatever. So, repairs and stuff on it wouldn't be covered by insurance. That'd be a lot more money out of their pockets.
Now, is that true? Is that are we sure on that? Or?
I'm not sure on
because
that.
I'm still wondering, was insurance a thing back in 1912?
I honestly don't know.
And that makes me sound dumb as hell, but, I mean, I don't know. And can you see, does it say anything about that?
It doesn't say anything on here about it.
Well, who knows, guys?
It said it's just that it wouldn't be bringing in any money if it was broken down and just sitting at a dock somewhere. Like
so, in other words, it was going to cost them money sitting because they got to pay for it to be docked.
Right.
So they probably thought it was better just to let it go and start fresh. That way they can start making money, opposed to having a ship that was docked costing them money. Mm-hmm. Got you.
Right. So then.
Plus, they probably had loans and they owed on it and shit. So if they're owing on it, they're not making any money.
Right. So, the Olympic, which is now secretly operating as the Titanic, would be taken out by an accident or whatever, and then White Star Line just could collect on an insurance payment, of a brand new ship, while, what I'm saying, while still having the Titanic, but no one knows that.
But at the same time, you'd think that would make their reputation bad. People wouldn't want to get on their ships, especially back then.
Right. So the guy that was behind it was this dude named J.P. Morgan.
The dude at the bank?
I guess he was...
Yeah, the banker.
Yeah.
So look, that's what I'm saying. All these guys are in on it.
They said that he might have been behind the switch. Because he wanted to drown his enemies on board also.
Okay, so then maybe that goes back in. He was in cahoots with old Rockefeller.
Yeah.
Because Rockefeller was the oil man. J.P. Morgan was the big banker. Mm-hmm. Rockefeller probably banked with him. They're all in on it together. This other guy might have had a competing bank or whatever, and it was going to fuck with him.
Well, here's some interesting facts. Supposedly the Titanic they didn't allow the Titanic to have a public examination before its voyage. And some say it was out of fear because they would be found out by experts that it was actually the Olympic in disguise.
I'm starting to think this is a good theory you got going here. Mm-hmm. And I've never heard this theory until you tell me about it tonight.
Right.
But like I said, I'm just kind of a casual. You're more of an actual fangirl of the Titanic.
Yeah. So it's pretty interesting. I mean, and some even say also, just looking at the ship itself, under construction, you see differences in if you see Titanic in port where it's being built.
Yeah.
And then seeing it out before it leaves.
Uh-huh.
They look different.
Slight variations.
And it looks more suspiciously like the Olympic than it does when it was being built, as the Titanic.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know. It could be. I don't know.
It's an interesting theory. I can see it being. I mean, like I said, the fact that people were there and some said there was no iceberg, that right there makes you go, what the fuck you mean there wasn't no iceberg? You were there when it hit, Mm-hmm. So if you're telling me there wasn't no iceberg, maybe there really wasn't no iceberg. Like I said, but then how did it sink?
Well,
dynamite?
This is
or purposely crashed into the iceberg.
So this is also another thing that people say that they swear that it's the Olympic. because, like I said, the Olympic had already had an
The minor
accident,
accident with the tugboat. I remember
and it
that.
was on the bottom like
The
area,
same
in the
area where the
front,
iceberg
the
hit,
same area that where the iceberg hit.
quote
So it was
unquote.
already weak.
Yeah.
So that's why they let it hit on that side to ensure that it was going to
So in
sink.
other words, it probably, if it would had been the first hit, it might not have done nothing, or it might not have punctured it.
Right.
But they were probably afraid it was.
So it makes you wonder, instead of letting it go straight, hit on, it turned. Maybe they knew.
But it makes you wonder if, since they were designed for 4 of those bellows or whatever they were called to take on water.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if their theory was they'll wreck it. It won't sink. They'll be able to limp into England or wherever they were headed, and then they could scrap it as damaged. Right? Mm-hmm. They could limp in, but I guess what happened, I guess they didn't think it was going to be that bad.
Right.
But that's a hell of a gamble to take, man.
I know.
But but my thing too, was the captain in on it? I doubt it. I really don't think the captain was in on it. It makes me think he was around a bunch of henchmen working for the reptilians, and by that I mean these rich scumbags, and they're guiding, basically guiding him steering him the wrong way, if you will.
Right.
Purposely telling him bullshit like, oh yeah, we're clear, and it was a fucking lie. You never know people what they'll do for money, even back then.
Yeah.
And they probably lost their lives anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
And the scumbags still win in the end.
That's crazy.
Well, this was definitely an interesting topic. I guess if we find out more stuff later on, we could come back to it, maybe have a shorter episode, do an update. But it's definitely, like I said, very interesting. And I would also like to talk about some other boats at some point. The Costa Concordia is one we should do.
Yeah.
That was a more modern. We'll be able to get more information on it, I think.
Yeah.
More accurately, anyway. Since there's so many stories about Titanic out there. Because over 100 and something years already.
Right.
Nonetheless.
Definitely very interesting.
Yeah. Well, appreciate you talking about it. That was Maury's take on the Titanic. She's a fangirl of it. I've known her for a long time, and she's always been a fangirl of it. Anyways, appreciate everybody checking us out tonight, and we'll be back some point with another episode. Don't know if we're going to do a conspiracy, a mystery, or a crime. I know Maury knows quite a bit about criminals.
I do.
Unsolved mystery type stuff, and a bunch of weird conspiracies. Might talk about aliens or ghosts or you name it. Paranormal stuff we could do. We have a variety here. So, thanks for checking us out. See you next time.
Bye.